them down and flush them out. We don't play up with these cutters, bet my youngest chop me down.
Welcome to the Reframing the Image of Relationships podcast, where we dive into the heart of what makes relationships thrive. In a world filled with complexities and challenges, this podcast stands as a beacon of hope and wisdom, guiding you through the art of nurturing meaningful connections. Our discussions are more than mere conversations. They're a roadmap to healthier, more fulfilling relationships. Whether you're seeking to deepen your understanding of love, improve communication with your loved ones, or find guidance in times of relational turmoil, this podcast offers a fresh, faith-centered approach to facing these challenges together. As we unpack the mysteries of human interactions, we invite you to open your hearts and minds to the transformative power of love and empathy. Get ready to be inspired, enlightened, and equipped to see relationships in a new light. And now, to guide you through this journey of discovery, please welcome your host, a visionary leader and a true catalyst for change, Dwayne Dwyer, but we affectionately know him as the Mindset Coach.
Great Saturday morning, everybody, and welcome to this month's episode of Reframing the Image of Relationships. We're your hosts for this morning conversation. My name is Dwayne Dwyer. I go by the Mindset Coach, and I am joined by these wonderful ladies. Up top with me, you have Miss Lisa Keys, also known as the Voice of Reason. Below me, we have Miss I Am Queenie Love, the conversationalist herself, and our new member, and we are just honored to have her, is Miss LaVon Norrells. And please correct me if I say that wrong, but she is also known as the Love Doctor. Ladies, how are you doing today?
Well, thank
Wonderful.
you. How are you?
Awesome. Did I pronounce your name right?
You did.
Okay, good.
Good job.
You know, we known for messing people's names up in the great state, so I'm just saying, I just want to make sure I do it right. Listen, it has been a while. We missed last month. Right. So I want to ask you guys real quick, if you don't mind, how are you doing so that everybody out there in the airways can actually get reacquainted with you guys since it's been 2 months? So how are you?
All at once, huh? Oh,
All at once.
Good. I'm doing good. I'm so thankful to be here to continue to unpack how we can be in relationship with each other more in a more healthy way. So I'm looking forward to the conversation. I'm blessed. I'm here to see another day. The sun is shining. Look, I don't have no complaints. I'm not going to complain.
Over there looking like she on the beach.
Well, I am well. Thanks for asking, Dwayne. It's been a beautiful last couple months of recovery, and I'm stronger. And much like you said, I'm blessed by the best. I'm good.
That's what I'm talking about.
I'm grateful to still be here after the grandkids left last Saturday. So. The 2 months I've had grandchildren, I don't know yet. Ask me next week or the next time, okay?
Gotcha.
Ooh, bless your heart. Ooh.
Y'all know children are blessings. Stop that.
Mm-hmm.
As
Teenage
always,
boys, I think not, and a 7-year-old. Okay.
Oh, okay. All right. So you got a range that you got to deal with.
Right. The 7-year-old is actually the adult, and the 14-year-olds are the children. Absolutely.
Isn't that normally how it works? The youngest one be the ringleader?
Absolutely.
Kind of reminds me of a Bernie Mac joke. Okay. As we get started, as always, we enjoy these conversations. They're insightful. They add value, and that's our only goal when we come on these conversations. So again, I look forward to this conversation, not only having conversation with you, but having conversations with our awesome members in the chat. So again, wherever you are, whether you're on YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, by all means, let us know that you're here, because on this channel, we like to acknowledge you by name. That said, good to see you, Miss Crystal Everett, Miss Ravonda Jackson, Miss Adrian Artist. Welcome to the show. Good to see you, Miss Michelle Ray. Greatly appreciate you and your contributions to this channel. Listen, I want to make sure I put this out there. Any donations given to the channel is actually given back to the community. So that being said, whatever comes this way, we make sure that we add it back to the community in the form of some of the products that we actually provide. So thank you so much. We greatly appreciate that. The Bryant family, Black Love and Beyond, welcome. Good to see you. What up, B? Miss Bernadette Simmons? Good to see you as always. Nick D, welcome to the show. Let me see. Poor man's Dr. Phil. Y'all know he gonna start trouble, just so that y'all know. That's what he do. Good to see you, brother, and welcome to the show. Adrian Walthall, good to see you, sis, and welcome to the show. So if you guys, before we get started, again, just a quick reminder, soon to air in the month of September 21st, correct me if I'm wrong, will be the first episode of the Hearts of Women podcast, hosted by that young lady over there. So Miss Lisa Key, she will be driving a train behind that, and I get to hang out in the chats and be a nobody. Loving it. So I'm looking forward to it. I think it's going to be good. I'm excited to hear what that platform does, how it progresses, and I am expecting a lot of great things. So make sure that we show up and support. Make sure that we spread the word, because again, we like to make sure that we look at everything from all different perspectives, hence the channel's name. Ms. Verlene McCoy, good to see you and welcome to the show. So unless anybody have any other points that they want to make before we get started? No? Everybody good? Everybody ready?
I just want to say that I'm excited about this Hearts of Women. I'm excited about it, and I'm going to be working on it. And I'm calling, I'm call a few people, and we're gonna talk about this. So I'm preparing myself for this. I'm excited. Just wanted to say that.
Sounds like she's making her list and checking it twice, y'all. Y'all better get ready for the phone calls. All right. Yeah, I'm excited as well. Okay, so let's kind of get this conversation started. Have you ever wondered why some relationships thrive while others struggle to stay afloat? Why is it that some couples seem to effortlessly navigate life's challenges while others are torn apart by them? Whether you're married, engaged, or simply interested in understanding the dynamics of meaningful relationships, you've likely asked yourself these questions. Today, we're diving into a topic that goes beyond surface level advice and gets to the heart of what it truly means to be united in a relationship. In this episode of Reframing the Image of Relationships, we'll explore the profound concepts of divine unity and unpack what becoming one really means. We'll discuss how this powerful principle can transform not only marriages, but also the way we understand and approach our relationships. So stay with us as we guide you through a journey of deep reflection, offering insights that could be the key to unlocking a more fulfilling and harmonious partnership. Trust me, you don't want to miss any moment of this discussion. And don't forget to check the show notes for additional resources and ways to connect with us after the show. So that being said, I also want to say, according to Miss Queenie Love, I did not put out the information. So again, reframing the image of relationships, check the show notes right up under the screen on YouTube, right, and get access to it. On this channel, it's intentionally called Empowering Perspectives, because we believe that everybody is a subject matter expert of their own perspective. So that being said, on this channel, we welcome insights, we welcome feedback, and most importantly, we also welcome questions. And as you guys know, I will derail a whole show for the sake of answering questions. So as we get started, before we get into the questions that we actually have, I want to ask you guys one simple question, because the title is What Becoming One Truly Means in Relationships. So in your own opinion, your perspective, your thoughts, and all of the great wisdom that you have, what does becoming one really mean to you?
For me, becoming one means that I have to become one with myself and the Most High. Until I can have that relationship with the Most High and know the direction in which I'm walking in, I can't become one with anyone else. And that's what becoming one is for me.
I believe I agree with Dr. Love. I agree with her, and I also want to say that I don't want to go too because I don't want to go too far ahead. So I'm trying to make sure I say it right there. But I think that becoming one has a huge. Um, I can't think of the words right now. I can't think of my words. But becoming one is us. Go to Miss Queenie. Then I get my thoughts together. Go to Miss Queenie.
Okay. So, in my own words, I think it's being vulnerable in every way to each other, with each other. I can't imagine becoming one and still keeping the majority of myself locked up from that person because I'm afraid to be vulnerable. So, I think you have to. I believe that that command was that we leave our own selfish thoughts behind and lean into a oneness of each other. Um, so you kind of like if you move, I move, just like that, right? So that's how I look at it, and really being able to be vulnerable in that regard because I, I've seen relationships where vulnerability is lacking and they tend to be going in two separate directions just because of the lack of vulnerability towards each other. So that's what I have for now. Lisa, I hope that was long enough.
I was just trying to weave in identity to what 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 the love doctor was saying, because when we don't know who we are, we can't identify who we are, then it's impossible for us. I'm not going to say impossible because nothing is impossible, but it's difficult for us to become one because there's so much conflict and we don't know we are. Our identity is found in so many different things, our degree, our title, our identity is found there. So how can we become one when we don't know who we are? And that's what I wanted to add.
It don't work unless you come off of mute.
We ain't gonna do this today, me and you. I'm just saying. Okay. So yeah, I am going to hold my response on that. I kind of gave my response last night. And it sounded a lot like a combination of what the love doctor and the voice of reason said. Um, but I agree wholeheartedly with everything. I'm 100% locked in because if you go by what the love doctor said first and then tie in what Lisa said, and then that gets me to what Queenie said. But the issue is a lot of time we try to do what Queenie said without understanding what Lisa said because we never do what the love doctor said. And I think that becomes one of the biggest struggles as it pertains to relationships. So I wanted to start there before we dive into the foundation of unity, simply because that to me kind of catapults everything. So the question that I want to start off really this conversation with is how does the concept of leaving one's family, father and mother, to form a new union with a spouse lay the groundwork for unity in marriage?
You said the concept, right? Okay. So of leaving the family. When our family has been our covering, and it reminds me of, I think it's Galatians 3 when it talks about the schoolmaster. I always have to go back there. But there's this transition that is happening so that we can begin to form and develop a relationship with God. And so the concept for leaving to me is for that you can form a relationship and begin to, I don't want to sound too biblical, but to form your kingdom in your family. So the order is already established. So now that's what you're doing. You're establishing your kingdom with your family. And you have to learn to do that in relationship with God, because you are developing, hopefully, and have a relationship and have been being taught, and have this example before you, so that when you leave, then you have the tools that you need so that you can continue to nurture and strengthen and provide and guide for your family.
We often say it's levels to this, right? So I thought about how you have to leave your parents. They've given you everything that they can give you at this point, and you move on to the next thing. And so I don't look at it necessarily as leaving your family behind, but more so going into a new union with someone and having a new family, which creates a larger community or a larger unity. So the concept of leaving one's family, that's really just shifting your mind. How many times have we woke up and I just can't wait to be grown. I want to leave anyway, right? So going through that as a child and wanting to leave, this is one way that you can, right?
I agree with the ladies. Also, I'll add though, whenever you break that down, um, Dwayne, you say the concept of leaving one's family, form a new union with a spouse. How does it lay the groundwork, right? Well, it creates a it's you and me, right? It's just an us type of situation. And we know that it's difficult to serve two masters, right? It's just really hard to have two homes whenever you are trying to trying to reestablish or get established. So you do have to forsake. I like that word. You have to forsake those. And I don't mean disown, you know, unlike, I don't mean any of that. I mean, you have to forsake so that you can focus on, and I like to even add what you've already learned, right? Whether it's good, bad, or indifferent, you take those things and you go over here, and now you create your own foundation so that you can build your marriage, build your family, build your new life. But you take the things that God has blessed you to have already learned, whether it's through observation or life experience itself, you put those over here and you start to build. So you forsake all others, you forsake all of this other stuff over here while you're focusing on building up a foundation to place your family on. So yeah, I just think those are some of the things that's you asked about the concept. I think that's what the concept entails.
I love it. I greatly appreciate those perspectives. And this is the main reason why last night I did not want to give a solution to the conversation we had when we were talking, because the solution is actually found in its entirety in this conversation, right? Um, and I agree with one of the things, if I can go back to kind of like paint a progressive picture, in our formative years, we are given an identity by our parents, right? And make no mistake about it, it takes both parents to form a healthy identity. And so as we're progressing, as the parents are training and teaching, there are certain things that they're teaching. And those things should help them to understand the difference between right and wrong. We understand what it's like. They should understand or have a pretty decent idea of what it's like to try to live a righteous life. But then understanding through trial and error based upon those things, they don't necessarily get it. So they go from identity formation into conceptual living, because sure, this is my reality, but this is what I'm supposed to do. And so through the lens of that concept leads them to how they esteem themselves. Right. So now in that progressive nature, they also are taught not only what the law, statutes, and commandments are, but they're also taught the significance and necessity of Christ himself. So now that gets them to a more holistic understanding. And hopefully, if it is actually being taught correctly, it is taught in the comparison or in the understanding of Christ in the church as a unity. So now, with that being a baseline model, that becomes the projection going forward in what they look for in their relationships, so forth and so on. Husbands, love your wives like Christ loved the church. Wives, submit yourself to your own husbands. So moving forward now, leaving my mama and my daddy who taught me all these things, who I greatly appreciate and love dearly, I leave them. And like Queenie said, I don't cast them aside and throw them in the sea of forgetfulness. No, there is, like the love doctor said, there are layers to this thing now, right? So my spouse is that's right there. I'm connected. We are joined at the hip. We are striving to become one. Mama, I love you, but you gotta, my wife comes first now, right? And the wife, like, daddy, I love you, but my husband comes first now. So that's kind of like what that means, and continuing and adding to what they're saying. So in that progressive nature, we should have a healthy idea of what unity in marriage looks like, because we understand how the scriptures build you up to understand the necessity for Christ and the church, and vice versa. So that's why I love this concept. Now, I want to kind of go back, because y'all know how I like to do. Um, in the midst of, and I want to ask, in your opinions, where does the concept get distorted? How has concepts overall been distorted in the space of family, unity, whatever the case may be? And we're not repeating last night. We just want to kind of give a comparison and a clear understanding.
Can you can you ask that one more time? Because I missed last night's conversation, so I don't have that to influence.
Shame
But
on you. Still love you though. To your question, where has over the years the concept of marriage been distorted?
I mean, that's a loaded question. Uh, the concept of marriage has been distorted in several ways because the construct of marriage was established for different reasons, right? So we can go biblically, or we can just go kingdom wise, right? With no biblical influence at all. So the construct of marriage was established for survival, right? Now, it has definitely evolved over time. And I think individually we make marriage become what we choose, or either what we've been influenced to believe, or whatever. Everywhere, wherever you've gotten your perspective or your concepts of marriage or your influence of marriage, that's why people choose to get married now. There's a lot of people that also choose not to. However, I think what has begun to influence the change and evolution in the way that we see it now is because everyone oftentimes are individualized. They're not codependent or interdependent. They are individual and very selfish and self-centered, and everyone is about their own need, their own gain. So here's where a lot of us have caught trouble is in marriage. And this is, I have a lot to say and I'm gonna try to just wait. But, when we start talking about husbands love your wives, and, wives submit to your husbands, and there's a lot there that we add in, but we're not doing what the full instruction calls for, right? So when we ask that question, there's a lot of things that has influenced change, and I will start with individualize has influenced change. Our own selfishness that shows up. The reasons why we get married has influenced changed. What we expect from a marriage influences change. And then we can talk about the biblical or religious aspects. Maybe some people don't have that as a covering, or they don't have that as a thing to lean on. They don't understand that construct. They don't understand the structure. But on the other side, we also see some of those marriages succeed. So I believe it is an individual situation that causes these challenges, right? Because we are all individual versus that first thing you said, and on in your questions later on, is that us becoming one. That's not really happening
Yeah.
today. I'm sorry for that long answer, but this is just one of the ones that, and I think Love Doctor mentioned earlier, everything is layered, right? It's layered. Even this question and the answer is so layered. So
Right.
I'm gonna be quiet now.
No,
Thank you
you're
for letting
good. Thank you for sharing. Loving the hat, by the way.
Oh yeah, this hat, just so y'all know, the viewers, the hat stays on when I'm trying to stay in my lane and I'm really trying not to say the bad words. The hat comes off because when I lose it, I'm gonna just take the hat off and just talk. So
Mm,
yes,
mm, mm.
yes.
All right. All right.
I think that marriages get the concept of marriage gets misconstrued because of what we see on social media, what we see in other people's lives when we're visiting our friends and we see they're married and we think their marriage is also great. And we those expectations come into play. I think that one of the words for not one of the words, but the Hebrew meaning of cleave means to have passion of heart for, to keep close. When we start becoming individualized, what are we keeping close? We're just keeping ourselves close. Do we also push away the Most High in doing so because we get so self absorbed? And I think that those are some of the things that are causing relationships to be doomed, if you will.
I like it. I like it.
Yeah, I have to agree. And influence for relationship comes from the beginning. If I have to go back, because we did say this is layered, but when you want to go back to uncover or peel back the onion, as Coach always says, about the process of our mindset, where are we getting the ideals, who's teaching us, who is teaching them to us. We get them from our upbringing, a lot of them, right? And then we leave, and then we understand that something may be a little bit different from what we were taught or exampled, and then we see other ideals or influences that will sway the way that we used to believe. And so there are so many things that are happening that influence relationships that are not beneficial for us. And when I think about us being being one, as I'm going to use this as an illustration. I'm getting ready to do an illustration. We take Adam and you take his rib out, and we have two. And now it's their job to come back and to be one. So that's our whole goal. Our whole goal is to come together and so that we can be one. And we can't do that when we have this individual, and when we're being individualized, or if we are looking at other sources that never instituted this us being in relationship. We're looking at other sources to say, this is how you do it, or this is the example that I'm going to give you. And then they're not being honest because they're going to only show you what they want you to see on camera. But the other aspects of their marriage or relationship, you don't get. And so we have to be more diligent in identifying what relationship is supposed to look like versus what people are showing us that they say is happening when it pertains to relationship. Do we have my question is, I had a question when you asked this question, and I think I asked it last night, what is our example? Where's the framework? Where do we get this example? How do we see it? What's healthy? What helps us to identify what a healthy relationship is? I'll rest there.
Nope, you're good. Queen, I like the fact that you started off the way that you did, because that's a lot of what we talked about last night. A lot of individualism is the thing that makes it very difficult, almost impossible to come together, becoming one. And what you end up finding is that you have more of a transactional relationship, as opposed to a more transformational relationship. I believe the space of relationship is transformational in nature, for both parties. But what we end up doing is that we approach relationship like job. So I have a responsibility. This is my job description. If you don't do your job, it makes it difficult for me to do my job. So then I come and tell you how to do your job. And in the space of me coming to tell you how to do your job, you might get offended because you'd be like, how dare you come and tell me what I'm supposed to do? How dare you come and tell me what my responsibilities are? Focus on what you're supposed to do, and I focus on what I'm supposed to do. And in a perfect world, it'll work itself out. Well, that becomes part of the issue. I love the fact that the Love Doctor brought in the Hebrew translation to cleave, because you're right. There, it is a very deep connection that man and woman must form in order to become one. The union, as it is based upon worldly concepts, does not make you one. It is just a piece of paper that binds you for tax purposes, right? And then what we do is we take that thing and say, hey, I was married now, and it's great. Congratulations. Now the work begins. And in most cases, what you'll find is that most people will put more work on the front side as opposed to what they put on the back side. But any couple who've been married, and I'm sure the Bryant family, Black Love and Beyond, they can tell you that after the ceremony, that's when the hard work began. You got to go beyond the honeymoon stage, right? Getting beyond the honeymoon stage, now you got to work. Now you got to put in. It takes a lot of thought. It takes a lot of patience. It takes a lot of efforts. But if I'm all about me, I don't want to put that in for the sake of, I don't want to overlook this thing that you did to me. I don't want to just say, hey, you know what? I don't want to fight every battle. No, I'm going to stand my ground, because that's what these influences, as Lisa said, that's what these influences are teaching me. It's telling me to voice my opinion, blah 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 blah. And it's not that your opinion doesn't matter, but at the end of the day, is it really necessary? To does it work for the sake of the union, or does it work for the sake of me? And I think that becomes a large portion of the problem. I like to look at it like a house. You get your brand new house, that house is awesome. You love that house. But over the time, that house tends to wear down, right? You got to do a little love. You got to put a little love into the house, as we tend to say, in order to keep it and maintain it and so forth and so on. However, I would say this: as that house starts to erode without any care, without any upkeep, and without anything that goes along with it, so does that concept that Lisa talked about. Like, where do we get the model of a healthy relationship? We've been given it to we've been given it. It's been shown to us. It's been articulated in writing. But from generation to generation to generation to generation, it had eroded. And so the erosion of that model that was given to us has got us to the point to where we are now. And I think it takes us as a community collectively, Gen X's, the rest of the boomers, like, we have to be completely transparent. We have to be honest. We have to share the things that we've learned over the years of making bad decisions and say, hey, we may have done some things wrong. That's okay. It doesn't make you a bad person. It makes you honest. It makes you transparent. And through the sake of transparency, I think the younger generation will look at you as a trusted resource. And I think that's part of it. So appreciate you guys. I love your responses. Listen, if you are listening to this show right now, regardless of where you are, make sure that you hit the like button. Make sure that you share it, because as you're seeing, this isn't an easy conversation. I commend them so far on everything that we talked about. But again, it takes a lot when it comes down to coming together as one. Did somebody unmute just now? I kind of cut them off. Go ahead.
Well, you
Yes.
didn't cut me off. I just wanted to add something. I know you're ready to move on, but when I listen to really all of us and look at our comments, and the discussion of relationships transcends time, generations. Um, but if we're honest and we all just kind of think back to when we were growing up, how many of us actually saw marriages, like not one, but I mean just a multitude of marriages that were working, that we knew were working? I mean, how many times did we ever hear, husbands or wives sit around and even speak positively about their marriages? Even now, if you go to a bar, which is where I started Bar Talks, if you go to a bar, the people at the bar are complaining about marriage. They're complaining about relationships. They're disgruntled. They're resentful. They're not telling their spouse how they truly feel. They're holding all these things in. And instead of talking and learning to communicate healthily with their spouse or together in a healthy manner, they go out and event, and then they wind up in someone else's bedroom. And these are the problems that we're facing. So while we may talk about a foundation, I think it's very important for us to really talk to couples, people about the real true things that they struggle with. in the relationship. Because when you are faced with this, if you've never heard a conversation about it, naturally you're going to lean over here and see social media, because that's where they're talking. That's who's talking about it openly, whether it's toxic or not. They're talking about it. And if you do enough clicks, your algorithm is going to justify what you're feeling, what you're experiencing. But I believe that we do not talk and share the things with each other so that we know what's really going on. Because guess what? Our kids grow up watching us date or not date, be miserable or not be miserable, be disappointed by a partner, not be disappointed, quiet couples living in homes together. The kids have no idea what's going on, and then suddenly they're in the middle of a divorce. They never see the family have an argument and know how to mend it. This is the stuff our children are growing up in, this dysfunction. And we are all to blame for that, not somebody else. Nope, because we have an opportunity to do something different. And we can sit on here and we can talk about this, but how do we show up in our actual relationships? How do we really show up in our actual lives, in our dating spaces, our marriage space? These are the conversations that I think are missing from social media and from our neighborhoods and from our churches. All right, I'm off my soapbox, you all. Thank you for listening.
You know what? So
Yes,
I
sir.
agree. I agree. Doggone it. No, I agree. And the other side of your question is that how many failed relationships have they seen? And believe it or not, you could be husband and wife with children, and that relationship failed. It's a traumatic experience for that child. And then they go into their life with that traumatic experience as a foundation of their understanding of what relationships look like. And now you say that, well, this is, and I'm just being transparent, even because let's be real, church folk get divorced too. Just tell you the truth. So you taught me all these things growing up, but then you get a divorce. Like mom, dad, it didn't necessarily work. So why would I follow that? I get it. But it's not that that didn't work. It's just that maybe mom and dad didn't necessarily work. Maybe mom and dad made a decision prematurely before they understood what they were getting into. And I think we have to always go back to that as an understanding. The decision that you make without information will actually have a result that you're going to have to deal with at a later point in time. So it's our responsibility to arm our children, to arm the younger generation with the proper information so that they can make better informed decisions than what some of us made in the earlier times. So I think that is also one of the most important conversations to have, because that lays the foundation of what that looks like going forward. I agree, we can hang out and talk about, all of the things, that didn't work, but why not talk about the thing that actually works? You know what I'm saying? Why not talk about what the creator has set in place for us? And if we actually follow his instructions, then we might understand that that is the way. That's the process to what it looks like moving forward. Let me pause right there, because I think me and you have been hogging the mic, and I want to make sure I give Lisa and Levon. Yeah, you got your hat on today. I got you. Give Lisa and Levon some mic time.
I really totally agree with everything both you and Queenie has stated, especially because I think that the dating, the courting, those phases in life were important as I seen growing up. No, I haven't seen many marriages where they were blissful, but I do have one that I think stood the test of time, and that's my grandparents. And so, although I don't look at my relationships in that way, I think that they took the time to date, because I remember as a kid seeing them date. And I remember when it became courting, because they were looking at homes together. So they had the conversations, I believe, in order to get them to that level. And I think that we're missing greatly on those conversations in order to make a decision of alignment, because it boils down to, do I really align with this person? And of course, I'm guilty of it too. I jumped into relationships and, oh, that wasn't for me, and made a bad decision. But I don't go into the next relationship taking that baggage, though.
I guess one thing that stuck out to me that, and I'm so glad that we're having these conversations was, Queenie said that, they may be in the bars and having conversations with people other than the people they need to be having conversations with. And so that, and if we're in those spaces, right? And if the conversation happens to be a conversation someone is trying to have with us, can you advise them, in that same environment? Can you advise them? Because I think that they've made up their mind at this particular point. So the conversations that we have got to be intentional about are with the people who we're in relationship with, and having the difficult conversations have to be at home, because nothing else is going to be resolved if we do it any other way. That's how we have to be intentional about it. The brothers are going to be there to encourage and lift up and talk to their brothers when they have these times of uncertainty in their lives. And we as women need to do the same. If we're supposed to be there and we're a community and we're supposed to be helpers one to another, you say the things that some people may not want to say, because I'm not a yes person, and I'm not going to be complicit or participate with something that I know that is not ethical and it's not beneficial for you. You don't even know it at the time, but it's not beneficial for you either. And so those are the things when I think about community and I think about relationship, that we have to be intentional if we're ever placed in those environments. And God gives us the opportunity to speak to them and encourage them, that we should. And that's all I had to add.
Yeah, I like that, and I'm agreeing. I think as parents, and I'll start there. As parents, we need to develop a good, healthy relationship with our children, so that as they get older, they view us as trusted advisors. But that kind of segues us into the next question. Um, in what ways might prioritizing the marital relationship over the familial bonds contribute to a stronger, more unified partnership? Now, when you answer this question, I want you to think about after marriage, what happens to the parents, the in laws, and the outlaws. I'm joking with the outlaws, but what happens with the parents? Like, what position do they fall into? What role do they play in conjunction with this?
I hope they play a role of keeping their mouth shut. But that's beside the point. I'm just keeping it a buck. My grandfather said, hey, if you spend 99% of your time minding your own business and the other 1% of your time leaving everybody else's alone, you'll be productive. And I believe in that. Okay. Um, but in all actuality, I could appreciate some information from elders or something, but as far as unifying with a partner, I think that the focus and the energy needs to be put directly into the relationship in order for it to build, to contribute, excuse me, to a stronger unified partnership. Um, because times are not going to always be easy. And so you're going to have to learn how to work through the good and the bad. So as long as you continue to focus on that marriage and focus on that relationship, because as you guys say, the relationship is the most important person in the relationship. I think that is the best thing that one can do, because ultimately, intimacy, we need to share an identity with one another in order to gain that oneness.
Am I the only person, whenever she talks, I always have a flashback of Police Academy? Remember that part where he said he wraps his hand around the dude's shoulder and says, "Pay attention, because the love doctor is about to speak." I'm sorry. I love it. But
You
I do.
always got jokes, right?
I do. I'm sorry.
And I like that, even though it was said and she said it's so serious but funny. Um, we are when our children leave, you know, they've already seen an example that we've given them. We had the opportunity already to raise them up. We can't go back and do it again. And so then you have to be their advisor if they seek advice from you. Other than that, my job is I'm going to be prayerful. I'm going to speak positive every opportunity that I get. And I'm going to continue to when you come to me for advice, I'm going to be there to give you the advice. My daughter even told me, we had a conversation, and she was like, "Well, Mom, you didn't do this when I was younger, you know." And I said, because you got a different version of me. You know, I was younger. I was 19 when I had her, and a young wife and a young mother. And I said, and there's so many things that I learned along the way. And I said, and I didn't do everything right. So I had to go back and have a conversation with her, because I wanted her to understand that I'm available to for you to give you to be here. I'm here for you if you want the advice, but I'm not going to force it on you. And I'm going to listen to what you're saying, and we're going to have these conversations, because my goal is that you will have a healthier outcome in life, because of some of the experiences that I didn't know, but now I do know, and I can share them with you. You don't have to repeat the same thing over. Now I know I didn't do it all right, but I can tell you right now, it's much better than it was, when I first had you. So I just pray for me. I want the young people in our generation that are coming up now, and us. It's not their responsibility, but it's our responsibility to say, listen, I didn't necessarily do this right, but I'm here if you want advice from me now. Um, and because I know when I hear them talk, because I have a slew of nieces and nephews, when I hear them have conversations, they are interesting, and they are very vocal about some of the things they experienced growing up. And those are opportunities that we can go back and have conversations.
Wow, that was great. I definitely agree with both of you ladies. I'm just going to break this down a little bit differently though. Um, God knows I do remember my daddy telling me when we got married, he's like, "Look, if y'all can't do right by each other, y'all need to leave each other. Don't beat my daughter. Don't put your, you know, that was his words. And other than that, y'all won't hear from me. He wasn't going to meddle. But one thing I knew for sure was that if it came down to us becoming physical, obviously he knew. He knew human nature, and he knew that this was possible. And he gave me that warning. He gave me a warning about physical, and he gave me a warning about money. And he told me those are the things that tear up a marriage. And so I mean, he also included infidelity, but those are the two major things that would tear up a marriage and cause contentment and resentment. And he left it alone after that. But when I think about this question, um, there was a time, and I can't remember where I read this, that when you got married, you focused on your family like for a year or two. You didn't even work. You just focused on your family, on building your family. I cannot remember where I read that at, but
Deuteronomy,
okay.
I know it's that 28, I think.
And there you go. Got my church hat on today, y'all. All right. Thank you, Sister Lisa. I appreciate you. But I know that there was a time that that was the instruction, and I better understand why this was necessary to do this. So at the end of your question, you use the word unified partnership, Dwayne. And if we just break down those two words, unified simply means brought together, combined, and united. And then partnership is an agreement to cooperate and advance mutual interests. They share the responsibility. So, in order for you to do that and do it right, you cannot also be committed to other family relationships in the same manner. You have to turn to each other and make a full commitment that this is what we're doing. However, I think what happens is some people go into the marriage with that mindset and other people don't. And so now you have divided people from the start that are walking down the aisle together. So I think if we begin to really, if we're speaking unified partnership, we're talking about marriage, we're talking about differentiating between your now bond with your new person and the bond that you have with your family. I think we have to teach what that really looks like so people understand the concept and they can adopt it and change it up a little bit if they want to work for them because there is no one cookie cutter way. But first, it is the being brought together. And then the second thing is in agreement. And now you walk in that together agreement. But I don't think we're doing that. But I think it's important, if we want these relationships to work, we walk in agreement together. What we had with our family was what we had with our family. But you got to turn over here and take real intentional time to build a strong relationship so that when the ways of the world come up against you, you can stand. Otherwise, you're going to fall.
I love it. So you must have your heels and your church fan at the same time. Because girl, you was on one today. I'm joking, but I'm serious. Like I like the fact that you went and broke down the term unified partnership because I am totally in agreement. And I like the fact that the Bryant family said it provides a framework. Absolutely. Absolutely. Agreed 100%. As they say in these social media streets, no lies detected, right? This and I love the fact. I'm loving what everybody says, and love Doctor. I like how you came in, like mind your business. But here's the business that I believe they need to mind. When my child get married, I become a trusted advisor. I don't advise my child because it's my child. I advise the union that they had made a covenant partnership for. That's what I'm advising. I'm not advising for the sake of, oh, that's my child. I got to protect my child at all costs. And I'm not talking specifically about your father. I know exactly what you're saying. And absolutely, I don't want nobody putting their hands on my daughters either. Right. So, but these are conversations I'm going to have with her before she, go and say I do. But once they say I do, then my advice to them becomes for the sake of their unified partnership. I think in both essences, and I liked in the beginning, we talked about the individual nature of trying to pursue marriage, but then you also got to look at on this side to where a lot of parents are not necessarily advising their married children the right way. I like the fact when you go back to the scriptures how Jethro advised his son-in-law in-law. That wasn't even his child. He advised his son-in-law for the sake of their union. And I think when we really go and process that and adopt that, that kind of helps us to refine the lineage in which advisement comes. As a man, as a father, I will advise my son-in-law for the sake of their union. As a father, I will advise my son for the sake of their union. And I think too many times we get outside of the scope of that. We still want to hold that tight bond with our child because this is my child. I understand he or she is married now, but this is my child. I advise them first for the sake of their own individuality. So then what ends up happening is that the in-laws become a problem for the actual relationship without even understanding that they're doing it at such a subconscious level that they're taking their child to the dependency of their childhood to where my father will always be there for me. Well, your father is not the father. And if your father is not advising you according to the father, then your father is in the way. If my mother is not advising me according to the will of the father, she is a part of the problem. So that's kind of like where I will start there, because I love Adrian's question in relation to this entire conversation. What happens when a spouse won't let go, right, of his or her immediate family or in a conflict with the idea of leaving said family in order to lay the groundwork of the new union in marriage? I wouldn't just leave it at just the spouse. I would also tie it to the parents as well, because some parents struggle with letting go of their child. Some children struggle with letting go of their parents. Like, I get it. My daughter is a daddy's girl. And so at the end of the day, sometimes daddies, we got to make sure that we're being honest and transparent and say, hey, I can appreciate the tie that you and I have. We can have conversation, but I would never have individual conversation that goes against the unity that you agreed to do. That's your covenant. And so when I advise erroneously, now I'm in error, not just with you, but with my father. When the child struggles to let go, they have already violated what the scripture says. When the child has submitted herself to her father and have not submitted to her own husband, well, you got to realize you're submitting to somebody else's husband, even though that husband was your father. So that becomes the thing. So when we don't actually understand these things. We don't understand how to prioritize these relationships according to what the scripture is demanding. We now put ourselves in error. I want to pause there so that you guys can respond, reject, or respond to Adrian's question, whichever way you want to go with it.
Well, I totally agree with what you said, Coach, because I had an issue at first when my son got married. I didn't particularly care for the young lady. But then I had to take a step back and say, this is not my relationship. And so I moved myself away from it, where when my son or my daughter in law called, I'm like, you're not going to put me in the middle of this thing that you decided to go out and entertain. And so because of that, once I removed myself, they found their way to counseling, and they found their way in communication. And now when they call me, or when a suggestion is requested, I'm capable of asking them the questions in order for them to come in to their own answers. So um, purposely, though, because my son was a mama's boy, I had to remove myself from the situation, and for that very reason that you described.
I think about I think one time you gave an illustration, Coach, about the significance of the father giving his daughter away in the ceremony. And then I thought about, as you were talking about the relationship. So the relationship with the newly married couple, the relationship with the parents and their role, and the relationship that we all have with the father, because he's already given us instructions. And so the instructions were given to us, and all of us should adhere to them if we want if we desire for ourselves and for our children, the next generation who are entering into a marriage, to have a healthy relationship. We're the advisors by the advice that we get from the father, and they come to us for that advice, not anything personal, because at this particular point, you're not an individual. You're not my daughter. You're not my son. I'm not trying to, disown my children, but I'm saying, but you belong to God. In your relationship, you have to develop with Him, just as I had to. And so when I was listening to it, I was like, wow, there's so many times that has not happened, or we have not conceptualized, our children moving on and becoming and entering into a relationship, and how that should look. Are we talking to them about it? Are we having a conversation to help them to transition into their next phase of life? And so I think that's where these conversations are so important, because there's so many things that get uncovered and unpacked as we're having these discussions. And so the most important person in a relationship is God, for the parents and for their children who just newly married. And it's our responsibility to adhere to the instructions that He's given us so that they can have a healthy life. And that does not, when I say healthy life, does not always mean that there's not going to be any trials and tribulations, because the Word of God tells us, I think it's John 16:33, in His word we will have trials and tribulations, but be of good cheer, for I have overcome the world. So they're going to experience some things, and guess what? We can't enable them. We got to step back and let them experience the same way that we had to experience it.
Amen. And amen. So, one, I will say, y'all, I am so thankful that my father gave me that advice. Because not only did he give me good marital advice after having 40 years in the marriage game, but he also gave me good spiritual guidance. And he was the one person I trusted that I could get it from, because he was going to give it not just to me, but he was going to give it to my spouse straight. And we needed that. So I was thankful for that. And I think that when we find people that are walking out the life that they can teach and they can pour wisdom into us, I think we need to sit at their feet. And so I was thankful for that. But I wanted to address the question that Adrian did put up. Y'all know I come from a psychological background, so I'm always gonna ask this question: what is the spouse's attachment style? Because some of that has a lot to do with the attachment style of that spouse. So I'm not gonna put religion into it. I ain't going to put the body of Christ in it. I'm just going to say straight up, the attachment style of this spouse is likely the reason why they're having a hard time detaching from their parents. So if you understand the detachment style, that may also help you to know what to work on if you go to marriage counseling, because that's going to be likely why there's an issue with that person holding on to the ideology of leave your family and just come over here and be with this one. That's tough for certain attachment styles when they grow up a particular way, and understanding their trauma, understanding all of that background. And I say this because, again, I come from a psychological background of looking at things. So I believe, Adrian, if you are still here from a non spiritual space, from a non-religious space, I would like for you to better understand that person's attachment style so that if you decide to go and get counseling, you all can work on working around that attachment style, because that's probably what the real challenge is. And also understanding what trauma they might have gone through that now causes them to have a real issue with leaving, the concept of leaving, because what really could be surfacing is a fear of abandonment or feeling like they are abandoning. So be mindful of that, because sometimes we look at things and like, yeah, this is what the Bible tells you, yeah, and you should do that. Well, I mean, that's great. There's nothing wrong with that. But we still have psychological warfare that we battle with. We battle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities. So understanding that that may be what the challenge really is may bring a new light to things and allow you to see them through a lens with empathy and care and compassion, and have just a little more patience with where they are.
Just really
I
quick.
so
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
no. Go ahead. You first.
So I didn't technically answer the question, but I did. So it says the spouse won't let go of his or her family. I forced my son to let go. That's why I removed myself, because of my own biases. And I'm a single mom. I don't know how to tell my son how to be a man, what he's supposed to do with his wife, and all I can lead him to is the scripture. And still, he has to make his own decision. So this is a question that I have read 5 times sitting here, and I don't think I still would do anything wrong or different, should I say?
Prospectively thinking from a psychological and spiritual perspective combined, I cannot be responsible for the things that you have not fixed in your life. That's where I will start, right? Because the minute that I become responsible for it, I become responsible for it for the rest of my life. My commitment, ideally, right? The covenant I made is with the Father. She is the beneficiary of it, and vice versa. So it is my responsibility to fix me. I can't hold her responsible for fixing me. We can have conversations about it. She can understand what I'm working on, and she can exercise patience and empathy. Like you said, I agree 100%. And I'm not saying, and this is not totally void of what you're saying. It's not a totally different idea. It's just a repackaging of the same thing to show that even though when we go to, and I'll call it academia, because in the midst of, my background, I say it that way. In the midst of my background, what we find is that psychology and spirituality is not a separate entity. What you'll find is that a lot of times academia wants to separate it, especially depending upon your field of study. However, in most fields of study, because you are a three-part being, it can't be separated. Therefore, when we separate it, what we're doing is causing a divide, and we're separating these people through the lens of empathy and care by separating that person from their creator. But I can't separate, I should not, me personally, I should not separate you from your creator. As a part of the agreement, we become accountability partners, right? And I love what Levon is saying. She made the hard decision for her son based upon the agreement that he made with the Most High. I think poor man Dr. Phil said it in the chat. I advise according to the statutes, not my thoughts, not how I feel about it, not any of those things. I have a responsibility. We all have responsibilities. So they're not totally separate entities. When I separate it, and again, I'm not saying anything totally opposite of what you're saying. This is like a different way of saying the same thing, right? But for those people who don't believe, absolutely spot on, right? For people who do believe, okay, here is a more holistic way of seeing it. Because ideally, if there is an attachment concern, right, when we start talking about attachment styles, it doesn't affect, it not only affects my inability to let go of my parents for the sake of my relationship, it also affected the spouse and how I connected with them. So it's not just a one way street. This is a more holistic thing. It also affects my finances. It also affects jobs. It affects everything. So I'm agreeing with the attachment style, but it doesn't end here. It goes all the way throughout the entire ecosystem of the person. And if we try to solve a problem by creating another problem, we create a bigger problem. That's why I say when spouses, when they become responsible for what another spouse is going through, and then they make the adjustment for the spouse so that the spouse can continue to do it, you have now become a enabler. And becoming an enabler creates more of a problem than what you had in the beginning. Go ahead, Lisa.
or a God. So I would just add, because I guess when I hear attachment styles, I hear we still have to go back to the beginning. Where did these attachments come from? They came from our foundation. It came from our teaching. It came from our peers. It came from the different things that we learned. And so Nick D said in the chat that there's a lot of pre-work that we have to do. So the conversations that we have to have with each other before we even try to join ourselves is why we're having all this conflict and confusion, because nobody's doing the work. Nobody is taking the time to say, well, this is what's going on inside of me. And before I try to join my life with someone, I want to make sure that I'm okay. I can't dump this on anyone. Yeah, when we come together and some situations arise, then we can work on those things together. But even if something comes up and we're in a relationship and we're having a conversation with our significant other, we can still do the work. It's not absence of one another. It's that it just means that I have to do the work on me still. And I can't make it someone else's problem. I have to continue to, and they're there to support you. They're there to be with you. But the word of God says, cast your cares on me, for I care for you. I can't put all this on you, because what happens is you're going to have this big old giant container on your back and it's going to weigh you down. And that's not the purpose of us coming together to be in relationship. For me, my thoughts. That's my thoughts. So when I go back and I hear um, the different things that we say in these environments, I try to be very mindful, because everything has to start somewhere, I guess. And so we can't separate the two. We have to continue to combine them together and work on them, and then unpack everything and come back together in a more healthy, holistic mindset.
If I can just say this,
Sure.
I do agree. I just want to make sure that what I said doesn't get convoluted or misconstrued. Um, I 100% stand 10 toes down on attachment style.
Hmm.
And my reason is because people go through things. Um, and it shows up in their lives, and it shows up in how they manage their lives. And if you're married to a person that has gone through those things, we cannot dismiss that. That is real. And although it is for them to carry, it's a privilege for us to understand what's going on with that person.
Sure.
Um, Maybe we should have learned it long before we got married to them, but sometimes people hide those things because they're not comfortable with that reality. But instead of just expecting people to be exactly where we are, because that's just not how it is, I think we should understand where people are. And I personally try to meet people where they are versus just expecting you to have arrived. And I love the fact that we're suggesting pre-work, because oftentimes in relationships we don't do enough pre-work, but we still go down the aisle. And that's the reality. So as much as we can say, well, that's not what's happening. We're not doing that. We're not. The nature of man is not doing that. We are running straight into whatever it is that we want to get into. But how do we manage that once we're in it? Do we be dismissive of a person's problems? No. I don't even put it back on you. It's just like, okay, this is an issue that's impacting all of us. So while we're in therapy, let's make sure that that's being taken care of over there because it is impacting. And if we're talking about someone leaving their family and cleaving to their spouse and they're having a conflict, it is important to understand why that's a challenge. Maybe that's not their belief.
Mhm.
So again, if we don't understand where a person is at, we're putting things on people that is unrealistic because it's not where they are. First thing is, how did we get here? Because they can easily challenge, well, why is that your thought? Oh, well, that's because this is said to be the creator's ideal for the construct of marriage. Yeah, but where'd you get that from? People can always challenge no matter what you're thinking. So, in a relationship, why not give your partner the benefit of being able to tell you where that's coming from? What is that thing that when they hear cleave, what's that thing that just doesn't sit well with them? It's important to know that. And I stand on that. So I get what you're saying, Dwayne. I don't think that you would necessarily, if you're disagreeing with me, that's fine too. But I'm going to stand 10 toes down on how people operate. There's a message that they're telling you. And we can put the Bible on it, we can put scripture all day, but there's a message that they're telling you in the flesh that they are dealing with. And I think it is only fair for us to deal with that as it comes.
So I don't think anything you said was outside of what I said. That's the best part about it. Like, I didn't say dismiss, never was a word I used. I didn't say reject. I didn't say omit. I didn't say any of those things. But what I talked about was responsibility. I can't. Let me say it like this. I'll go back to the working scenario. Okay. And I use the working scenario simply as an analogy, but it's not a complete holistic analogy based upon what we're talking about. If you have insecurities in your job, right? If you dealing with imposter syndrome, whatever that looks like, well, that's a bridge that you're going to have to cross. That's what you're going to have to deal with. You signed the contract. You have a relationship with you and your company. It's kind of like the old Bernie Mac saying, right? I have a contract betwixt me and you that says you do what I tell you to do. Therefore, right? So your insecurities is your responsibility. That does not say as a coworker, I won't listen to you. That does not say as a coworker we can't have healthy conversation to give you ways to overcome that. I think sometimes what we hear a lot of times when messages come across, we hear a thing as an absolute, right? It says, because I believe instead of the Bible, I am absolutely void and totally disassociated with anybody who does not read the Bible. That's not a true statement, nor is that an accurate statement. So when we're talking about according to the scriptures, according to the word of God, according to the most high, we're talking about a more perfect way, according to my belief system now. And I have to root it in that. According to my belief system, we talk about a more perfect way of being according to the one who created us, because he is the one that knows my identity better than me. So when we start talking about insecurities, regardless of what avenue they came, it is only because I do not have a connection with my identity. So when we start talking about attachments, I attach myself to a thing that makes me feel better about who I think I am. And in most cases, when we talk about who I think I am, it is probably rooted in something that does not look like him, that does not speak like him, that does not follow his law, statutes, and commandments. So again, I want to make sure I'm saying that, because for everybody who is hearing this, like me and Queenie, we do this all the time. But it's nothing personal against her. I want everybody to understand that. But I want to be clear, because this is a lot of what the world believes. This is a lot of what social media purports. That if you believe in the Bible, you think that the people who don't believe in the Bible is the scum of the earth. No, that's not what anybody who believes in the Bible is saying. In fact, what we're really saying is that the door is always open. We're just not going to force you to walk through it. That's a more better way of living, because it makes space and room for all of us. Because let's be honest, all of us wasn't always in the kingdom. I'll talk about this guy right here. There's some things I did years ago. Like you looking at me right now, like that ain't the same person. You're right, it ain't the same person. So that's the point that I'm saying. That's the point that I'm making. When it comes down to the space of relationship, it's not that we don't have honest conversation. It's not that we're not transparent. It's not that we don't understand what a person is dealing with. It's not that we don't empathize with their situation. It's not that we don't have patience in their situation. It's just that when it comes down to understanding what empathy is all about, I don't own it. And that's the space that we all must be in the space of interpersonal connection. I'm sorry, I think Lisa Lavon was about to say something. Nope. You're good? Okay. Put your hat back on, Queenie. Put your hat back on. All right. Great question, Adrian, as always. Let's jump down to spiritual and emotional dimensions of becoming one. I think we probably got time for one question here. How does a focus on spiritual and emotional connection in marriage enhance the unity that goes beyond the physical bond?
I'll go first so I don't take forever. So when I heard this question, the first answer was deeply, right? If we focus on it, how does it affect it? It affects it deeply. That was the first word. And then I thought about when we are one in Christ, it's an investment. That is an investment. And one in marriage should be an equal investment, right? So I also shared that spiritually connection to me means simply an emotional investment. And here's my example of that. I thought about when people are, you mentioned, like, if you grow up, you're in the church, and then suddenly you break away because something has happened, or you've learned something different, or whatever. But you, like, you know what? I'm not doing this anymore. You are emotionally devastated when you have to walk away from church. It is emotional when you walk away from religion. It is emotional when you say, I'm not going to be believing in God or Christ or this or that. It is an emotional overload that you go through. And when I think about the absence of that and how emotional we become, it lets me know 100% that it is an emotional investment whenever we are in relationship spiritually. And it should be the same when we are in relationship with our partner, our spouse, whatever name you want to put that under. So that enhances the unity between a couple, non physically, but emotionally, mentally, spiritually. Every part inside of you becomes connected and rooted and grounded and familiar to the other. That's all.
I agree. I think that is definitely true alignment in what you said, Queenie, especially when you start thinking about, our souls and our purpose and how they may intertwine. I remember having a conversation, a couple weeks ago, maybe even last week, where, without purpose and without one having a purpose, it's hard for another person to come in and be submissive and fall into alignment because there is no spiritual or emotional connection. And so, because of that, what's the point? Why are we even here? Why was this not investigated? So how does focus on spiritual and emotional connection in marriage enhance the unity that goes beyond the physical bond? I think it is that oneness of the soul and the dreams and your faith, and how you're able to communicate and intertwine that into the relationship.
I think the friendship is the most beautiful aspect of being in a relationship, in connection. Um, and that's developed when we walk together. When we have a understanding of um, what it means to be in relationship and be led um, by God, who is the creator of the institution of marriage or relationships. And when we have a understanding of that, and we understand our emotions, because our emotions, we always talk about emotional intelligence, right? So when we understand that we can't take things personal, and I'm talking about the intricate um, components that happen within a relationship, becoming friends, right? Entering into a relationship spiritually and emotionally and being connected. These are some of the things that I believe connects us. And it goes far beyond the physical, because honestly, the physical lasts for a moment. I'm just not being facetious or anything, but how else are we connecting? You know, what are we working on together? How are we proving God's will for our lives when we come together? So it has to be beyond physical, and there's so much more that um, that is available for us to learn and to tap into when we don't leave it at the very minimum of physical connection when we are in relationships. And so it's so important for us to understand who each other are. What are your dreams? What are your goals? Um, what is your plan for this union, for this family? And so those things are important because they bring us together closely, and we cleave to each other. That's a part, I think, of us cleaving. The vision is a part of us cleaving together, and understanding what we want as we're walking together. Not that we have all the answers, because we're learning en route a lot of times, but I believe that those are some of the things that bond us together.
I love all y'all, but y'all being nice. Um, when we look at the how factor, I'm going back to what the love doctor said earlier. This is a layered thing. First and foremost, I should not move into the space of a marriage until I am properly aligned. I kind of mentioned a few seconds ago that we are three-part beings. When my flesh is the leader of the pack, then physical bonding is all that I am looking to do. It is what it is. Therefore, my emotions will make every decision that governs my life moving forward. It depends on how I feel. It depends on what makes me feel good, and so forth and so on. So there's no room in my space, and there's no room in my life for anybody else, because my emotions are absorbed. They absorb all of my space. When I become properly aligned, which means that my spirit is the leader of the pack, it is the authority, right? Of course, the mind always stays in the middle because that's the battlefield. My spirit is the authority of my life. Then my emotions are now placed in its proper perspective. So the emotions don't make the decisions for me. The spirit guides me in the decisions that I need to make. And then I emotionally attach myself to those decisions. Well, those are more creative in nature, because ideally, in the space of partnership, the Bible tells you clearly that two are better than one. So when it comes down to the how, again, if my flesh is making this decision, then it's all about the physical bonding. I can't even see anything beyond that. You might be a great conversationalist. You may have all the compassion in the world. You may be a very sweet and nice person. Sounds great, means nothing to me, because the physical is all I'm looking for at that moment, because my flesh is leading the rail. Like, I tend to say it like this: when I am when I am not properly aligned, my emotions will show up. My emotions will show up at the level of my ego. So my ego becomes the decision. Like when my ego is bruised, my emotions show up. But when my spirit is the authority, like my ego doesn't really matter. Like you can be completely honest, transparent, all of that great stuff with me. And even if you say, hey, you are wrong, I'd be like, how so? Help me to understand where's the details behind that? Where's the evidence to support this thing? Because I'm open to the fact that I'm wrong, but don't just tell me I'm wrong. Tell me where I'm wrong at so I can fix it. So as we look at this work that I have to do in me, because again, I can't make that your responsibility. When I look at this work that I have to do in me, once I do that work, that now makes me available for closer connection. In the space of availability for closer connection, now it's not the physical that I focus on. Sure, I know, we kind of got, everybody has personal preference, and I'm not taking that away. I want to put that out there before we go any further. Personal preference is a thing. Everybody has their personal preference. And I'm not ever saying that anybody is wrong for their personal preference. However, what happens beyond the personal preference? Where do I get to the point to where there is a more deeper, authentic connection that reveals this thing that we call intimacy? And I'm not talking about intimacy as the world think about it. I'm talking about intimacy from the perspective of that bond that we're talking about as it equates to becoming one. Because the only way I can get to that bond to where we can become one is when I don't think that I am above everybody in this relationship. If I think I'm the most important person in this relationship, there is no becoming one until you unify under me according to my will, as I say. However, comma, when I let the spirit be the deciding factor, we understand what happens under that. The spirit becomes the deciding factor because he himself is wanting to do the will of the Father. Therefore, when he does the will of the Father, we get in alignment with the Father's will. When we get in alignment with the Father's will, then he directs how it's supposed to be, not me. And so I think in the space of how now we get to the space, we get to the point of understanding how to actually do it. And I think, if I'm being honest, a lot of us want connection before we get to the point of doing the work that we need to do in ourselves so that connection can be honest and authentic.
I have a question, sir. Can I ask it?
Absolutely.
So this question here says, how does a focus on spiritual and emotional connection in a marriage or relationship, right, enhance? So my question to you is, what is your perspective on, or not in perspective, but what is your description of what an emotional connection looks like as it relates to this question?
So, as it comes to the fact, or but as it relates to emotional connections, obviously, and I think I talked about this what 2 weeks ago on Coach's Corner. Emotions for us fall into three, and when I say us, I mean everybody. It falls into three progressively expressive categories. You have a subjective interpretation of reality, you have a physiological response, and then you have the expression. So when it comes down to number one, physical bond, right? The subjective response is based upon my interpretation of what I see or what I am trying to feel. You guys can read between the lines. I don't have to be specific about that. That causes a physiological response. Again, you can read between the lines. I don't have to be expressive about that. And then the expression of that is based upon what I want. Okay, going back to the spirit, it is all about what the will of the Father is now because that's what he wants to do. Therefore, the emotional connection identifies you as more than just your outer garment. It identifies you as a child of the Most High. It identifies you at the level of who he created you to be. It identifies what it looked like going back. I think, Lisa, you talked about Adam and Eve and the rib, where the Most High took the rib out of Adam, right? It identifies what coming one, and I like to use the image of the yin and the yin and the yang to describe that because you have a perfect circle that is made of two separate parts. But when you separate those parts, it's not a circle. It doesn't even roll. To be honest with you, put them together, it's a mantle of perfection. So it identifies you as being an authentic part of me that I actually need for the sake of fulfilling the will based upon the uh, what he called me to do. So that spiritual connection, that emotional connection that you're asking about now is all about number one, serving him, and number one, serving him by honoring you as my bride or vice versa.
Okay. I would like to hear the ladies if we have time, because this is a very interesting question. How does a focus, so that is us intentionality on spiritual and emotional connection. So first of all, we have to understand, right, our own perception of spiritual connection and emotional connection, right? Um, but we're talking about two people and not just one. So how do two people, with their focus of spiritual and emotional connection, how does that enhance the unity between these two? How do we grow closer other than just having a physical bond? What are we building so that we can unify, right? So how do we grow spiritually together and emotionally together. And what does that look like, knowing that we all come with two different sets of tools that we're using? So I would love to hear, because this is just an interesting question, because when I look at that, we use the word emotion here,
Hmm.
and I'll just love to hear, because emotional is a feel, is a thing, is like you said, an expression. So I love to hear what others feel when they're reading that. What does that really look like? Because I
When
mean, I
you,
see the answers. I love the answer that Michelle Ray um, she shared. But I'm just wondering, when we say the focus on spiritual and emotional connection, how does that enhance the unity in a marriage?
when you say
Just
two separate tools, what do you mean when you say that?
meaning that everyone comes with their own perspective of what spirituality looks like and emotional connection looks like. They're coming with their own bag and they're going to pour into this relationship. We're coming with a different set of tools, right? I may be this way as it relates to spiritually, emotionally. You may be that way as it relates to spiritually and emotionally. How do we take these things and pour them into our relationship and create or enhance a unit, more of a unified kind of connection within our relationship? I'm looking at it literally when this question is posted. So I'm just wondering what others, when you break it down like that, what others are thinking when they're, what does that look like for them? I'm sorry.
I'll go ahead, because this, to me, we talked about this a few times, and I think we put it on the website, on the chat board. And I'm talking, when I'm speaking from it, I'm speaking from it from my perspective as a woman, okay, and as a possible, as a wife. We help mate. When I think about the emotional aspect of it, that's what I think about. I think about the helpmate, the aspects, because I wanted to look it up because I couldn't remember it by verbatim. But the aspects of supporting your partner, your partnership, being supportive in it, okay, helping provide emotional and practical support. Both parties can do that. Communication, be open and honest and communicate. It's essential in allowing both partners to express their needs so we can understand each other's needs and concerns. Understanding and empathy. Sometimes uh, we can, when we have this mindset that, well, he's strong and he can take it, and not understanding that maybe we have to show some empathy and we have to show some understanding, and not automatically assume that they're okay, because sometimes that's what they just say, I'm okay, I'm fine. And so those are some of the things that we have to be mindful of, because if we don't, we're going to have him going to the bar and talking to somebody else and then ending up with them. I'm just saying. I'm just saying. Encouragement. I'm speaking to me as all these can apply to both of us in a relationship. We encourage each other. Sometimes someone may be going through something and they just need to hear that encouragement from the person who they are close to, who they've cleaved to, who they've committed their life to. Sharing the responsibilities. A helpmate participates in managing the household, helping with the business, whatever that may be, but we're doing it together. So to me, it encompasses all of that and much more. That's just me just tapping on the surface. But to me, that when I hear that emotion, it's not just about a feeling. It's about me helping in every aspect of this union that I have agreed to be in, and that I have made a covenant agreement with. So it's not just about me making sure that my mate is okay, but it's about me making sure that I'm adhering to what God has told me to do in this relationship.
Well, there was a lot said, and how does it focus on spiritual and emotional connection in marriage enhance the unity that goes beyond? The very first thing that came to me when I read this question, and it keeps coming back to me, is the bridegroom and how Yahshua is the bridegroom, and having that oneness with the word, and how he loves the church. And if we consider ourselves that bridegroom and think back on that love and the respect and the resilience that that relationship brings about, I think that it covers the emotional connection, because it then brings about the happiness and the things that we so often seek outside of ourselves that we tend to find within ourselves in that moment.
So that, and again, not taking away from their responses. Sorry, wrong side. Not taking away from their responses, right? Um, this is why I talked about I must first get in line myself because my emotion does not supersede the spirit. That's why it's focused on spiritual and emotional connection, right? So once the spirit is in its proper authoritative place, then the emotions become a thing that I share with you. But until then, the emotions become the thing that I use to control you, manipulate you, do whatever that looks like. Because it has like when I'm improperly aligned, it's not about a deeper connection that a person would be concerned with. It's more so about a more controlling, manipulative connection. It's more so about, yeah, we in this, but like Janet Jackson said, what have you done for me lately? That's what people tend to focus on. And it becomes like a self-licking ice cream cone. You can have this conversation all day long with multiple people, and it's going to sound different because everybody has their own perspective, and they can, based upon wherever they come from, they're going to take that thing and make that literally the driving force. Yes, he's being messy. Going to take that and make that thing the driving force behind the conversation that they want to have because that is their source of power. So if beauty becomes it, that becomes their source of power. If education is it, that becomes their source of power. If money is it, that becomes their source of power. Therefore, now their emotional connection will have that as an identity metric. So if you're doing a thing or you're being whatever the case may be, then that thing is going to find its way into the conversation because it puts that person in the driver's seat, and all of it is wrong. So that's why when we look at this, spiritual first, then emotional, because the other way around, it's all about me.
So you went back to individualism, right?
When the emotions is over the spiritual, it is individualism. When the spiritual is over emotional, it becomes a more deeper connection that honors the Father according to His law, statutes, and commandments. Because I can't do it without the Spirit. I can try all day long, and I'm only kidding myself when I have people believe that. Yep, you got to, if you don't keep the commandments, you're going to hell. That sounds great, but at the end of the day, it's not me that does it. It's the Spirit that's in me that wills me to do it.
Amen, church.
I just want to make sure. Hey, I think she didn't take her hat off, so I think we're good.
I just wanted perspective. That's all.
Yeah, yeah, no, you're good. And so, but here's the funny part about it. I'm glad you asked that because I promise you there's somebody out there who wanted to know. They had that thought. Like, okay, I'm not a perfect being. Baby, you ain't got to be perfect. He didn't call you to be perfect. He called you to be progressive through him. And that's the beautiful part of it. So, we can look at our own insecurities, whatever the case may be. But at the end of the day, I can't use that as a sounding board and hold you hostage to that for the rest of our lives. We have to grow and do better in that space. So there you have it. Listen, the hour is upon us. Man, this time went by fast. I greatly appreciate everybody. Yeah, I know you are. I greatly appreciate everybody who, like, I appreciate all of you on this panel. Quinny, I appreciate the hat. Bring it back. We need it. Um, everybody who is in the chats, whether regardless of what platform you're on, we appreciate you. We value you. Look in the show notes. Join us on a community because this is where we continue in conversations by questions and having a more complete response where everybody get to respond to. So please don't forget to join us there. But ideally, at this point, this is that bittersweet moment where it takes us to our final thoughts. And we're going to start off with the Love Doctor.
Well, I would say my final thoughts are when we're thinking about the foundation of unity, make sure that your foundation is firm within yourself and with the Most High. I don't think that we can move on or forward with looking to cleave to something or have an emotional and or spiritual connection with someone else until we actually gain that for ourselves and that perspective. So in that, I would say that, find your own peace within yourselves and seek those relationships that are purposeful in nature in order for them to align with your purpose as well. And that's all I have for now. Thank you for having me.
You're muted, Queenie.
Thank you, sir. My final thoughts are to thine own self be true. No matter what, be true to you about who you are. And if you're growing in Christ, and even if you're not, be true to who you are and know that so that that person is honest when they show up in relationship. And I also would suggest when we're speaking about unity, find someone. If it's your partner, God knows them, that would be wonderful. Take the time to pray together, to study together, to worship together, to serve together. And do not be shameful in front of each other. Be vulnerable together. That's the only way that we're going to get past the challenges of this world when we are in partnership is holding one to another and being together. So thank you for the time. Thank you for allowing me to be here today, coach. I had a wonderful, wonderful experience.
Yes, I've truly enjoyed the discussion, and I look forward to us having more discussions about this topic because it's important. It's the foundation of this world. It matters for us to come together and be in healthy relationships, friendships, and just make sure that we're okay and we're constantly working on ourselves. Something Coach said. He said being progressive through God. So we're not called to be perfect, as he said, and that really um, stood out to me because I want people to understand that we're not saying, I'm not saying that you have to be perfect, but I am saying that you have to have a mind to want to continue to grow and understand and learn because that benefits you and it benefits anyone you're in relationship with. So when we're thinking about entering into a relationship, we have to be mindful. There is some work that we have to do. But that doesn't mean it stops when we join our lives with someone else. That means that we continue working and we continue to prove God's will for our lives and for the relationships that we're in, because we want to be an example for those in our community around us and give them an example of what God intended for a relationship to look like. So thank you so much, and I appreciate this time.
I thoroughly enjoyed this conversation as well. If you guys were with us on TikTok, I can't remember what Sunday it was. We kind of talked about some things. We talked about Proverbs 31. We talked about Ephesians 5. And we kind of like articulated what a lot of that looks like moving forward. Um, when we go back and you hear it a lot, the Bible says submit one to another. Sure, it does, but it continues to go on and it talks about what that submission looks like. And I mentioned it earlier. Husbands, love your wives like Christ loved the church. Wives, submit yourself to your own husbands. And I found myself saying something that stuck with me that day. And what I said is that for a man, for us men, um, the Bible, accepting our mantle, accepting who we are, right? Accepting the gift of God and putting ourselves in the right position, the right perspective, and understanding His word, His laws, His statutes, commandments, so forth and so on. Well, ideally, we get to the point of understanding what He called us to do. When we understand what He called us to do, then under that understanding comes a vision. That vision becomes the selector of my bride. Therefore, it's not based upon the outward appearance. It's not based upon the ocular perspective. It's based upon her ability to help me. For her, the word gives her clarity so she can see whether or not I am pursuing Christ. Therefore, I can be exactly how Paul said in the scriptures, follow me as I follow Christ. So together, when we come together, we are actually to the point to where we are working together to do the thing that He called me to do, because we are a partnership. This is the coming together as one. It's not me being more dominant over her or anything of that nature. It's us understanding where she is best suited to do the things that I cannot do. If it is a calling that came to me from the Most High, it is bigger than me to do by myself. That's the space where we have to understand, to where a lot of us, we might be just a little bit arrogant in our calling, thinking that we were called to do it by ourselves, right? Not only does it take the family unit to do the thing, it takes a community as well. because the family is the foundation of the community. So when you see community struggling, look around. I promise you, you see families that are incomplete as well. So that's my point. I'm going to leave right there because this is going to be a continuing conversation moving on to next month. Again, I greatly appreciate you guys. Again, check the show notes for your free download. Don't forget Tuesday evening at 7 p.m. Coach's Corner. Thank you, Crystal. Crystal's awesome. Crystal's just tearing it up in the chats. Thank you so much. I greatly appreciate you. I greatly appreciate everybody in the community, because what I'm seeing now, based upon your willingness to help, is that we're coming together for the greater good of everybody. And so when I tell you that this is a community that believes in uplifting and edifying, I really do greatly appreciate each and every one of them. That being said, enjoy the rest of your day. Have a phenomenal weekend, and let the best version of yourself be a blessing to somebody else.